Okay, good morning, members, and welcome to the Environment and Economy Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Tuesday, 12th of November. If I can start with any apologies.
Chair, we've only had one substitution today, which is Councillor Ian Hodge substituting for Councillor Ross Mansell.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Hodge, though.
He's online, is he not? No.
But that was I was notified of, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any declarations of interest, including whipping declarations?
Yes, Chair. It's Councillor Mike Pears. I have an interest. If we look at page 21, the cost pressure for specialist legal expenses under table 1 for planning environment. I'm chair of the licensing committee, and we have received special advice, and also we have dealt with residential mobile home licensing. I just want to explain that I have a personal but not prejudicial interest, and I will be speaking on this item when we reach it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Pears. Anybody else?
I don't know whether that includes me as well, because I'm on the licensing committee. Yours is just be personal anyway, wouldn't it?
It's just on the consultation of the proposed new national park. It's just that an area in my ward was proposing to be part of that, so I don't know if I'd have to declare any sort of interest to that.
Okay, right, nothing further on that agenda item. Okay, move on to number 3, minutes to confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of October 2024, page 5 to 8. Okay, I shall go through those on page 5, page 6, 7, and 8. Okay, can I move it that they're correct? Councillor Wakeland, seconder, Councillor Lloyd. Show of hands, all in favour? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 4, the forward work programme action tracking. I'll hand over to Steve.
Thank you, Chair. This is the combined forward work programme action tracking report that comes back every month for the committee, just to give an update on both parts. So if I take the action tracking report first, which is included as Appendix 2, just a couple of things to advise members on, particularly the task and finish group that is ongoing. There was a meeting scheduled for the 30th of October. That was moved back to December, 20th of December now, and that was due to the quite significant number of political group changes that took place recently. Some members came off various committees and were part of that group, so it was felt to give everyone an opportunity to meet on a stable committee, a working group, to move that back to the 20th of December, once political balance had been recalculated in the December council meeting. And the other update from the action tracker is the letter that's due to be issued to the First Minister. That is currently being drafted, and the intention is that will be issued hopefully this week, but it's certainly in the very near future. And if I move to the forward work programme, Chair, that's included as Appendix 1. There is one addition or omission, should I say, that needs to be members need to be made aware of, and that's in the March meeting, the 11th of March. The public convenience is scheduled for that meeting on the actual plan that's been updated recently. It doesn't show on your copy. Oh, I was told it's in March, so
Okay.
So it needs to be moved from February then to March. Sorry, Chair. But happy to take any questions, or if members do have suggestions for the full work programme, paragraph 102 does give some guidance to help members determine whether it's appropriate. I'm happy to take questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Can I bring in Katie first?
Yeah, there is one other item that's missing from the forward work programme, and that's a briefing session for members on the A494D crossing. So we've been in consultation with Welsh Government and Trunk Road Agency for North and Mid Wales, and we are planning to hold 2 briefing sessions for members on the 10th of December. I will circulate details separately via email to members once I've had the times confirmed and the venue confirmed. But that's to update you on their forthcoming proposal to go out to public consultation in the new year. But we wanted to keep you updated in advance of that.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I refer you, please, to page 15, Appendix 1, items to be added. Do you realise, Chair, that the items to be added, the placemaking plan for Buckley and the placemaking plan for Holywell, have been in that items to be added position since the 14th of November last year. It was on the December the 12th, January the 9th, February the 6th, March, June, July, September, and October. Are we actually going to add this, or are we going to delete it? It's been there 12 months waiting to be added. I just thought I'd bring that to your attention and
Okay,
more necessary discussion if we need to.
thank you, Councillor Pearce. I'll just ask the Chief Officer.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Pearce. Work is clearly still ongoing with both of those plans. I will clarify a date that they'll be in a position to be brought back, and we'll add that for the December meeting. So we'll have a date against them at that point.
Thank you. That'd be useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.
Yeah, could I just add to that? I think at the moment the Shotton plan is under consultation, and I believe the next one is going to be the Holywell plan in the new year. There's no date, as Andrew says, but that is definitely coming within the next few months.
Thank you, Councillor Dolphin. Councillor Lloyd.
Thanks, yeah. Is there an update for the access barrier report yet? That's on the bottom there, but it's not down to be reviewed.
That's a live topic. There's a meeting going on as we speak in terms of the access barriers, and the local members will get contacted as soon as possible following that, and then we'll bring a conclusive report back. Don't know whether it'll be the next one, but certainly we'll try and work it for that, actually.
I was just aware that Mark Isherwood had a meeting down by the river, but in Sonny Ferry, and I think it's remiss of him really to not invite the local members to those sort of meetings. I just wanted to make that clear that I would like to be invited if any meetings take place on my ward. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll note that, and it's critical that local members know about this first.
Okay, I can see nobody else indicating on screen. So we'll move on to agenda item 4. Sorry. What page?
Page 9.
Oh, sorry, the recommendations on page 9. The 3 recommendations, can I have a mover? Councillor Lloyd, seconder. Councillor Crease, show of hands, all those in favour. That's clearly carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 5, budget 25-26, stage 2. Can I bring in Chief Officer Andrew Farrer? Oh. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to give a financial overview first, if that's okay, and then introduce Andy and Katie into the meeting, if that's okay. As in past years, the budget for 25-26 will be built up in stages. The first stage has been concluded by the establishment of a robust baseline of cost pressures, together with member workshops and individual group briefings to ensure the members had a full understanding of the Council's concerning overall financial position. And in September, both Cabinet and the Corporate Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee received an updated position on the budget, which showed we had an additional budget requirement estimated at 38.42 million, which obviously presents a serious and major budget challenge for the council. And proposed solutions to bridge this gap are currently being developed and will be shared with members in due course. The overview and scrutiny committees being held throughout October and November are aimed at reviewing and scrutinising the portfolio cost pressures to provide assurance that they are an essential requirement for 25-26 budget and ensure there is no scope to remove or defer them to assist with dealing with the budget challenge. The draft Welsh Government budget is scheduled to be announced on the 10th of December and the provisional Welsh Government settlement on the 11th of December. And this follows on from the recently announced UK budget, which does indicate a significant amount of additional funding for Welsh Government over the next 2 years. But clearly, we need to remain cautious with health also a priority. So it remains to be seen the impact on the local government budget. Clearly, affordability will need to be a key factor in this budget process. So therefore, uncontrollable cost pressures will need to be a first call on the 25-26 budget, and other areas where we have a choice can only be included if we have sufficient funding identified from both Welsh Government and through council tax, and then compensatory service reductions from other service areas if they are available. The details on the solutions to date will be reported to Cabinet on the 17th of December, when we'll also know our financial settlement from Welsh Government by then. And at that point, that will be including the removal or deferral of some of the pressures. And then stage 3 of the budget process will be the identification of the full set of budget solutions required to ensure a legal and balanced budget is set in line with the council's overall available funding envelope. And the details now of the cost pressures and proposed pressures that we have for planning, environment and economy and street scene, which fall under this committee, are included within this report. So I'll hand over to Andy in the first instance for planning, environment and economy. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Good morning, everybody. Our PAB. So, as David has highlighted, this is the testing of our identified cost pressures for next year. There are actually only 2 from the planning, environment and economy portfolio, and I'll take them one at a time for ease of reference. They're in paragraph 105 of your report. The first one is expected pressure around legal expenses. Councillor Peers referred to this in the declarations of interest earlier on. There are actually 2 elements of this. There is the legal support for new measures which have been brought in and new procedures which have been brought in. And some of you may well be aware of the mobile homes recent action that took place, and we had to have a committee to hear that licence. So that was likely to continue into the future as we, because they've appealed against that as well. And we've got other mobile home licenses working their way through the system as well. And the second element of it is around prosecutions. And we've all got an expectation that we follow through on complaints and prosecute when necessary. This is specifically on the community and business protection side of our portfolio. So this is about trading standards prosecutions. It's about environmental health prosecutions. It's about private sector rental prosecutions as well. Now, we often define pressures in terms of a choice and no choice, and you can choose, enforcement is discretionary at the end of the day, but I think there is a public expectation that we follow through on enforcement when those notices have been served. That does come at a cost. Legal services are running with vacancies at the moment, and we need to procure that legal advice in to follow through on that one. So I don't know, Chair, whether you want to pause and reflect on that one, if there are any questions before we go on to the second one.
Okay, any questions from members for Andrew? Councillor Peers.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, as I explained before, I'm Chair of Licensing. We did have a recent recent licensing committee. The committee picked up that the fee had been waived by officers. Because the fee had been waived, it actually makes the application invalid. And that was the determination of the committee. For some reason, the fee of about £400 had been waived, and we said we cannot be waiving money like this. And I'm waiting to have a meeting with Gareth Owen about it. So that's the first thing. All the fees must be paid before the application is brought to the committee. Secondly, in note 1, it talks about prosecution costs. Can't we actually recover some of those costs that's incurred? Because whoever's being prosecuted have brought it on themselves to be prosecuted, and yet we seem to be funding that entirely. So can the costs be recovered? And can we look at increasing the fees of all applications, which will help mitigate some of this extra expense? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Pearce. So I'll take fees first. We took the decision on the advice of King's Counsel that we needed to move that site forward and bring it to a committee so that the application could be determined. We'd asked for the fee on a number of occasions. They'd not been forthcoming with it. And we needed to get to a conclusion on that site and move the process forward because it was just sitting in limbo. So that's the decision that we took to bring it forward. I know committee took a different decision with respect to the fee. I mean, the fee, you've flagged it up yourself, is £400. It's a drop in the ocean when you look at the costs of actually holding that committee and what's going to happen after it, because they've appealed it as well. So you're quite right. Ideally, we would have the fee in place, but on that one, we needed to move it forward, and we're content, having had the advice from King's Counsel, to do so. In terms of fees generally, we don't set all of the fees. So, for example, planning fees are set nationally. Now, some of them are fees that we are set, and in the third stage of the budget, so that's looking at trying to reduce and increase income for next year and reduce costs, we will be looking at all of our fees, Councillor Pearce and committee, in terms of what we can do to push that and the limit in terms of what we can do in terms of full cost recovery. Got some good news coming, I think, on planning fees, which will kick in hopefully towards the middle of next year. But certainly all the ones that we have control over ourselves, we'll be looking at those within the next stage. And the second element was recovery of costs. Yeah, we'll recover costs whenever we can, but the costs, whether our costs are paid by the unsuccessful applicant, is in the gift of the magistrate or the judge, and they may not find that our costs are going to be paid. So we will go for costs whenever we can, but again, that isn't a decision which is totally in our gift.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Pearce, you happy with that response? Or content?
Yes, I am. I just like to add that Mr. Farrow said it's a drop in the ocean. I think what the committee was trying to say, it's the principle. We had a written document on Flintshire County Council headed paper to say if the fee was not paid, it was invalid. And unfortunately, because of that, our hands were tied because we were following the procedures that were actually placed in front of us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions for Andrew, members? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Andrew. So, am I handing yourself, David, or
it's me on the second one.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. So we've done legal expenses, and the second element is the empty homes scheme that we want to be involved with, and this is about match funding for that empty homes scheme. I think all members are aware of pressures in terms of homelessness, etc. And this scheme, which has been developed by Welsh Government, is about bringing empty homes back into use. and there's an issue where we have to provide match funding at a relatively small amount to bring forward. We're identifying 10 properties based on other councils who've got involved in this scheme. It's I think is it a choice? Yes, it's a choice, but I think to be involved in the scheme, but I think given the pressures around homelessness, it's a scheme that we would want to be involved with, and we need to identify the money to offset against it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from members? Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you. Excuse the noise in the background. There's a lot of work going on here, so apologies for that. Yeah, I think when we start looking at pressures and solutions, we do have to start looking outside the box. And we might say that £25,000 based on the overall council budget, that is not a significant sum, but it's you know, it's a tidy sum. Can we have a look at perhaps looking at this in a different way? Could we not get that's, I think it's 2,500 per property. Could we not get sponsorship from the likes of builders, merchants and things like that could contribute towards some of the cost? You know, we have got to look at alternatives, and you know, is this something we could look at? I know that I've seen roundabouts with signs on that sponsoring different things, and I'm sure there's a capital receipt that comes into the council for that. So could we not look at alternatives? You know, we need to explore every single opportunity to try and get money from somewhere. Could we not ask for sponsors for this? It's just a thought.
It's an interesting idea. You're quite right. We do have a roundabout sponsorship scheme, which has been running for a number of years now. Quite how it would apply to this, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, in the bigger picture on this one, of course, once the house is brought back into use, we'll be getting a greater increase in terms of council tax coming in as well. So over the long term, if we speak to our revs and benefits colleagues, we'll be getting income in. But I'll give some thought to that, Councillor Pearce, in terms of sponsorship for this one, in terms of what we could do. Thank you.
Can I just come back then? Thank you for that, Andrew. Thank you for you're going to consider that. But I think if you had an arrangement, if there's going to be 10 properties to bring back an empty property, there's probably going to be some significant materials required. And if you could sort of have an agreement with a builder's merchant supplier as a sole supplier after a sort of tendering process, you know, I think that could work. But I'll leave it to you to explore again, Andrew. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Johnson.
Just a matter of clarification for the committee, I believe. Empty homes, Welsh Government grant, etc. This is exclusively private sector, not, so it does not affect our housing stock in any way. So it's us getting empty homes ready, working with the private sector to do that.
Correct. It's private sector only. Yeah.
Okay, I see nobody else indicating to ask any questions of Andrew for that. So we'll move on to the street scene element. And hand over to Katie.
Yeah, Bore da, good morning members, and apologies that I can't be there in person with you today. We have got several senior managers. I think there's a couple in the room, so Chris Goddard and Ruth Tully are in the room to answer questions afterwards, and Anthony's also online, but Barry unfortunately is not available either this morning, so we'll do our best. I don't know how you want to handle this, Chair, whether you want me to go through everything, because there's quite a long list on there, and then answer questions afterwards rather than doing one by one.
I'm happy for you to deal with it as you will.
Yeah, okay. That's fine. Okay, I think the first thing I want to point out is there's a note underneath the table on page 22. So all the items with an asterisk. We've done quite a lot of work since obviously these figures were included in the original figure of 38.42 million in terms of that gap. We've done a lot of work in the background to identify whether we can mitigate some of these pressures or see whether they can be funded differently. So we now believe that those can actually be removed from the list. We haven't done that until now because they were originally identified as cost pressures for next year. And obviously, if we don't do anything about these things, then they will continue to be pressures next year. So if I take you through them one by one. So the first one is around public health burials. And we have a budget that's based on 6 public health burials every year. We've noticed since the pandemic that these have been increasing, and mainly down to the cost of living crisis and people not being able to afford to pay the costs for funerals. So we on average, we're seeing around 20 per annum now. We've not obviously been given budget to pay for those. So this is only going to continue into the future, unfortunately, without additional funding. So that is one of the pressures that will remain going forward. The second one is around the Memorial Safety Programme, and that's for 17k. And this is a prior decision that was made by Cabinet last year in December, when we identified that we needed to do something around unsafe memorials and obviously curb sections within graves that needed to be repositioned or made safe. So the cost for actually fixing those is about 17k. We are looking at putting a bit, we have actually put a bid in this year for capital funding to deal with that problem, and we therefore believe that this pressure can be removed for next year. If we don't get the capital funding, then it would remain a pressure going forward, or we would have to delay those works. But obviously that remains a risk for the council in that case, in terms of slips, trips and falls from people visiting graves. So there is a risk if we don't address that issue. The third one is Harden Cemetery Extension, and we've had funding from the capital programme for the extension of the cemetery, but what we don't have is the additional cost for maintaining it going forward, which we believe to be around half a post. So the equivalent of a 0.5 full-time equivalent. So again, we are looking at options to fund this differently as part of a commuted sum for the whole overall scheme. So again, this is one we expect that can be removed going forward, and we can treat it differently. Item 4 is the replacement of the cemetery fence at Connors Quay Cemetery. We're currently incurring costs for repairing the fence and keeping it serviceable, and secure in terms of the cemetery itself. We had put a bid in last year, which was turned down. We've submitted a further bid this year as part of the overall bid for funding for cemeteries, and we are hopeful that we'll have that funding going forward, which will enable us to make improvements to this particular fence, but also the other border fences as well for cemeteries. If we don't get that funding, then obviously those repairs and maintenance costs are going to continue to cause us an issue in terms of pressures on the budget, and we estimate those to be around 40k. So that explains that particular one. Number 5, school transport. Again, this is one that we can't remove. We've seen a number of pressures come in for school transport. Some of this has been driven by the cost of living in terms of their operating costs for contractors around fuel, energy, drivers' wages, insurance. They're having to deal with the same pressures as we are. So we've seen a spike in terms of contract prices. We last procured all of our routes as en masse in 2017, and those contracts were let be on a 5 to 7 year basis. So over the last 12 months, we've seen a significant increase in contract prices as we've re-procured those routes, because they haven't had any inflationary increases in that 5 to 7 year period. We've also seen an increase in demand. This year from September, we've got 10 additional routes. which is also having a budgetary impact, and also the number of school days each year. We monitor that very closely. This year that's had an impact because there are an additional 5 school days this particular year. So we obviously every year we note that, you know, if those days are more than the base budget, which is based on 190 school days, it does have an impact, and that depends on when Easter falls. Again, we don't get given budget for that. So at the moment we have an overspend, which is on our action plan to deal with. But unfortunately, there's very little in terms of us being able to control that demand and also the costs when we do re-procure those routes. So that remains, unfortunately. The next one around local bus services is 150k. This has actually changed slightly since we originally wrote the report. We took a report last month to Cabinet and brought it to scrutiny as well. And this was around the local bus service budget in terms of the subsidies we provide. And we put forward some options in terms of how we might mitigate those. Those were approved by Cabinet last month and will now be implemented, and we can therefore remove that pressure going forward. Recycling income. This is a really volatile area that we continue to struggle with, and we have no control over the external markets for recyclable materials. There's a pressure of 150k put forward, which again, we have very little control of. We've seen some of those prices for the likes of plastics and tins reduce significantly overnight. However, we've done a lot of work in the background to try and broker better rates in terms of the rebate rates we get for some of those materials, and a recent re-procurement exercise for glass and cardboard has actually offset that loss of income. We are proposing to carry out additional procurement exercises for other waste streams over the coming months, and we therefore believe that pressure can also be removed going forward, as it will give us some certainty into the future over the next few years. So, we don't just procure those on several months. We're procuring them for a couple of years so that we can have that certainty in terms of the expenditure. So that's one that we do think we can mitigate against going forward. One we can't remove is the indexation for any inflationary increases for Park Adfer, which is where all the residual waste goes for the county. And, just as with our costs, they're seeing the same inflationary increases in terms of, wages, insurance and energy, which are unavoidable, so that we will have to pay those additional costs, unfortunately, and as will all the other North Wales authorities that are in the partnership. So that is unavoidable. Contractor price increases in terms of the materials recovery facilities. So all our recyclable materials are taken to a processing plant in Deeside, so everything that we collect at the curbside. We are seeing some increase in costs due to additional waste handling movements that are being incurred by the contractor. They've passed those additional costs on to us as an authority. We are doing a piece of work to identify how we might mitigate those costs through operational changes to avoid us having to do those additional waste handling movements, and we are anticipating that those pressures can then be removed from next year. Excuse me. Drainage for storm events, again, one that's very much outside our hands and is causing us a significant pressure in year. This doesn't just apply to storm events over the winter. We are seeing more adverse weather that impacts the highway network both in the summer as well, so it's not a seasonal issue. We are expected this to increase. We don't get given additional budget. We have previously been able to rely on the contingency reserves, but with those reserves reducing significantly, we have no option but to declare a pressure. So again, it's around the increased frequency and the severity. We are looking to see whether we can apply for grant funding to repair and have flood scheme alleviation schemes, but again, that's dependent on Welsh government funding. But this is mainly around our response when we're actually responding to weather events and the whole cleanup of, after an event, in terms of us having to repair and make safe roads, footways, and so on, and drainage systems. So unfortunately, we have no option, but this is a significant pressure for us going forward. Item 11, security costs for the depot and also for Greenfield. This is a combined one. It's not just security, it's also for some of the maintenance costs at Greenfield as well as security. So we put forward a pressure earlier in the year because of the increasing costs for security. We previously used to have a manned guard and dog handler that went around all of our sites and also manned the depot in Altani. We've reviewed that provision and we've actually implemented some changes already since September, and we've seen those costs reduce significantly as a result of those changes. So we now have monitored CCTV 24/7 and a key holder service to respond to any incidents that are identified. So this can now be removed, and it has already been delivered. Replacement heavy plant for our waste transfer station at Greenfield for composting. Again, some of the grant funding that we've had in previous years through capital funding to replace the plant and machinery, that they're now obviously approaching the end of their economical life again. Even though we've had the funding available, that has now been removed. That grant funding's disappeared in terms of us being able to apply again for similar funding. So we are going to have to look to replace some of those items of equipment in the next couple of years. And if we don't, we then see the repairs and maintenance costs increase to ensure that they're kept operational. We think that we can apply through prudential borrowing for funding to pay those back over a number of years. And if we're able to do that, in that case, we can withdraw this pressure going forward as well. So we are looking at options to fund it differently going forward. The next one around reduced income for the work that we undertake on behalf of the North and Mid Wales Trunk Road Agency. So we're a partner authority, just as some of the other authorities in North Wales are, for the North and Mid Wales Trunk Road across Flintshire. So that includes the A494 and the A55. So we undertake all the maintenance and any improvement works on behalf of the Trunk Road and Welsh Government. Just as we have seen our funding reduce, their funding's also reducing. We've had confirmation that their programme maintenance is continuing as it is now, because we have a duty to obviously repair and maintain the network. But their capital programme, in terms of any improvements that they wish to make, is been significantly reduced both this year and next year. So that's where we are likely to see some impact on our income. We do try and do that work in-house rather than go out to contract, but we do have, unfortunately, at times, because we don't have that specialist service provision with in-house, we do sometimes have to go out to contract as well. So barrier replacement might be a good example there. But again, we have no control over this. So it will impact if we have income targets set within our budget. We're not less likely to achieve those targets, which is why we've highlighted it as a risk. Number 14, this is again similar to one of the earlier ones around replacing plant and equipment at the HRC sites and transfer stations. This is around specialist containers, replacement skips. We currently we do repair and maintain skips where required. They're subject to normal wear and tear, just as anything else. And we have welding, from our mechanics in the workshop that will go out and repair those items of equipment. But it comes to a point where we actually need to replace some of those items as well. So the cost of those obviously continues to increase as those items of equipment age and over time. So we're now exploring options to see whether we can actually borrow through prudential borrowing and repay those back over a number of years, rather than us having large capital funding or a burden on the revenue budget in terms of maintaining them and repairing them. So we, subject to approval, we think this pressure can also be withdrawn. One area that is beyond our control is the maintenance of the depot at Altamy. This has been underfunded for a number of years. I think in the past we've been able to absorb some of those costs because of minor overspends across the portfolio, but we're at the point now where we're unable to do that. Similarly, we've seen some of those costs increase as well because of inflation. And we've already made the amendments to security and the cleaning provision throughout the depot, but there are some things that we just cannot control, unfortunately. And we have our own drainage systems that have to be maintained. We're doing a lot of work around the vehicle wash to try and bring down some of those costs, but there are certain maintenance costs that we have no choice, unfortunately, and we will see that continue into the future. Receptacles, this is one that I think we've previously brought up, and obviously with us focusing more on meeting the statutory recycling targets, this will naturally have an impact on the uptake in some of those containers. We did see an increase after the pandemic, and that was mainly down to people being at home more, and the closure of hospitality. So we did see an impact on, particularly on food waste bags and some of the food caddies increasing. We've done a lot to try and mitigate this one. Again, I think it's been masked slightly because we've been able to claim back the increase in cost through the hardship fund after the pandemic. And obviously that fund has now stopped. So we are doing a lot through our new managed stores contract to try and look at better sourcing in terms of procurement. So we are again looking to reduce that. We think that we can, through prudential borrowing, again look at an increase in the demand for receptacles to be funded through the capital programme as well. So we are exploring options around that. And again, this is one that can be removed going forward. The winter maintenance weather stations, we originally thought that we would have to invest in additional weather stations. However, we took a report in September to change the approach around our decision making for gritting, and interestingly, last night was the very first night we've actually had to go out and grit this season. Originally, we thought we'd need the funding through the capital programme for one additional weather station, but we've been through that review. Through the weather forecast provider, we don't think that's necessary anymore, because we've been able to identify that there are other weather stations just outside the county that we can rely on and get the same data, and we'll use those in our forecasting over the coming season before we implement the decision in full for next season. So this is one that we certainly can definitely remove going forward. With us obviously delivering the winter maintenance service, we are seeing an increase in our costs for delivering that service, and this is a forecasted pressure. The average, our budget at the moment is based on an average winter over 6 years. So again, we've based these costs on that average over 6 years. We are seeing that because of climate change or weather changes, we are seeing that season has been extended. Last year, for instance, we were still gritting right up until the end of April, whereas previous years, again, we've seen a narrowed window of it's always been November to March, but we are seeing us starting gritting operations earlier and extending well into the spring. So we are seeing a pressure in that respect. We're also seeing an increase in our costs for things like salt, the vehicles that we actually hire for gritting. Again, they're costing more than they have done previously. So we are seeing an increase in our costs as well. previously we've been able to rely on the contingency fund, and obviously if we use that, it's not then replenished. So, you know, again, it is a pressure. I suppose as we go through the season this winter, we'll know more whether that's a realistic pressure, and it may be that we're able to bring that down slightly, but it will be dependent on the weather over the winter period and how severe that is likely to be. It could as well also go up if we have a very severe cold winter with lots of ice and snow, more frequent snow events. Again, that pressure could actually increase. The last but one is around additional infrastructure. When we put grant bids in for building things like active travel schemes or new pedestrian crossings, so things like zebra crossings or new traffic signals, we always try and build in a commuted sum to help cover the cost of maintenance over a certain period following the implementation of that change. That's not happened in every case, so this pressure has been put in for us to be able to maintain them. So it'll particularly for things like zebra crossings and traffic signals. So this is a revenue pressure that's going to continue to present itself where we're not able to apply a commuted sum. And obviously, if we increase the number of assets going forward, that's only going to increase as well. So that's why we've included it here. The very final one is around the Mayrise replacement system, and this is our asset management system for highways and asset management. So we use this as our back office system. We use it also to have all our waste and recycling collection rounds on it as well. We have had funding this year to fund the replacement of that system, but we have identified that we are likely to need some additional funding next financial year for additional licenses, but also things like tablet devices that will be required for operatives who are out on site. So we hadn't built that into the original bid when we submitted it, or it wasn't eligible when we did include it, unfortunately. So we have asked whether this was something that we could include in the capital programme bids, but apparently IT systems are not part of the capital funding programme, so we're not able to apply for additional funding that way. So it is something that we are going to need going forward. So that's it from me. So I'm happy to take any questions, and officers obviously are available as well to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Are you going to deal with the 108, the ongoing risks?
Yes, I can do. Sorry, apologies. So these weren't included in the original 38.42 million. So these have come to light subsequently. So we are seeing some increased costs that, again, they're part of our action plan to bring down the in-year overspend already. But again, some of these are outside our control, unfortunately. So one is around the highway maintenance, and this is to do with our reactive maintenance. We brought a report last month through this committee and also to Cabinet around our review of the highway asset management plan, in terms of changing our approach to make the little money that we do have available to go a bit further. But what we have seen as a result, and it's not going to really change without more funding and investment in the network, we are seeing that the costs for reactive maintenance going up, and that's not going to change, unfortunately. So we have got a pressure of around 420k. So we are looking at things such as things like traffic management, where we might use contractors. We're looking to see whether we can do that in-house, but that's going to take some time. We can train our own operatives to deliver the traffic management, but that's pretty much a 2-year program. So it's not something that we can just do overnight, unfortunately. So we're trying to do more in-house and reduce our costs, but unfortunately, reactive maintenance is not going to go away. We covered it quite extensively last month. In order just to maintain the current the network, roads only, in its current state, we need 3.92 million, and as I documented last month, we only get 1.5. So it doesn't go far enough, and that's why we've had to change our approach going forward. As a consequence, those costs for reactive repairs and maintenance are only going to remain, unfortunately. So that covers that one. The second one is around street lighting energy costs. Again, this is something that's outside our control. We've done a lot over the years to try and reduce, our costs through Salix, like the LED installations. We apply dimming. We also apply part night lighting, where we might switch off, every third or fourth light in industrial areas where there's low footfall. And we do quite a lot of monitoring. We're really scrutinising every single asset that we have and identifying whether we can change that energy profile and try and reduce the costs. We are part of a Crown Commercial Services procurement framework for energy with all the other North Wales authorities, and that helps secure better rates. But we are seeing a significant increase in energy costs this year. We are looking into that a little bit to see, we've had some anecdotal reports via community councils who've managed to secure better rates via other energy providers, but obviously we're tied into this framework currently. And we are keeping that under close scrutiny and monitoring to see whether we can change the way we do procure energy going forward. But at the moment it is a pressure, and it's also an in-year pressure this year as well, which is on our action plan in terms of bringing that overspend down. The final one is around public conveniences. So we have a very small budget of 78,000 to continue to maintain the 3 facilities that we have retained in Mould, Holywell and Tallacra. And we contract that out to a third-party provider. But again, I mean, it's been a budget that's been overspent for the last 2 or 3 years. We've managed to accommodate that previously through minor underspends elsewhere, but this year we're not able to do that. So we are overspending for around 35k at the moment. And again, because of the, without that investment in the facilities to improve them or upgrade them, we are seeing those repairs and maintenance costs increasing. Every time we have an incident where they're vandalised or damaged, again, that puts pressure on the budget, and we have no choice but to repair and fix the damage, unfortunately. We are tied into a contract, as I mentioned, for the maintenance, so it's not something we can easily get out of either. But we are looking at what we might do going forward, and we've had things suggested to us about charging for facilities and community asset transfer, which we will look into. But obviously they need the investment up front to be able to do that, because even with a chargeable service, we would still have to bring them up to a certain standard and also invest in those payment machines, and there would be an admin cost as well for delivering that. So hopefully I've covered those in enough detail for members, but I'm open to any questions as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Katie. Okay, I can open it up to members. Any questions? Councillor Pearce?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Katie, for explaining that. I know it took a while, but yeah, the information was very useful. I'm not going to go through everyone because I can see there's been some good work going on in the background to reduce the amount of pressure, so that's got to be applauded. So I'll just pick out a bit more than 1 or 2, but not all of them. On the first one, on the cost pressure about the public health burials, could that be linked in with number 3, where that is being funded through a commuted sum? Can we apply the same, the same option to number 1, where we can get a commuted sum to pay for this? So that's the first one I'd like to discuss. Sorry if the noise is in the background. Apologies for that. The school transport, it tells us there in number 5 that there are 10 additional routes. Can you explain what that is? Are those mandatory routes that we've had to apply, and because they're additional, it tells me they weren't there previously? So what's driving that? On number 8, the residual waste indexation, it says the pressures for a contractual inflationary increase. Well, if it's contractual, if it was built into the contract that there would be an inflationary increase, that could have been predicted in advance, could it not? We would have known about this some time ago. You say it's unavoidable, if that's in the contract, that's true. But if it's a contractual inflationary increase, it's going to increase every year in the contract, that could have been predicted and perhaps sort of mitigated rather than being a pressure now. The 10, we've seen a lot of storm events and drainage issues, particularly down in the Sandycroft Manglet area. So it's essential that we do everything we can to mitigate those problems. Is it not possible to apply to Welsh Government for funding for extreme weather situations? Because all it does is impact our own budget, which is there for other purposes. Number 13, the reduced income. I didn't quite fully understand this. Are we saying that the capital program's been reduced, but we're expected to carry on as normal? Is that the case? Are we still carrying out the work without the required money that we need? 14 and 16, Welsh Government are pushing and cracking the whip on recycling. So I think they should be doing more to support us with the funding that we need for 14 and 16. I know that there are options there and the pressures could be withdrawn, but I still think that they should be providing more funding than they actually do. On 18, the winter maintenance service at the bottom there, it says the increase is due to increased contractor costs. Could you explain what that is, please? Just going on to the ongoing risks. Again, that's quite a significant amount, £420,000. And yes, it does take a big chunk out of the council's budget on highways maintenance. Again, is Welsh Government, can we ask for a specific help to help with that? And finally, on the public conveniences, is it not possible to seek a contribution from both Mould and Holywell councils to pay towards these public facilities? As you know, in Buckley, the town council fully funds the public conveniences, so it would seem appropriate, given all the pressures the county council is under, that we seek contributions from Mould and Holywell town councils. But thanks for the report, Katie, and thanks for the explanations.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pearce. Katie?
Yeah, okay. I might have to bring some of the officers in to support with some of these. The public health burials, in terms of linking it with commuted sums, we do try and do that where grants are available. So if there is a specific grant related to burials, for instance, we would apply, to try and incorporate that. But unfortunately, there is nothing available in this instance. We are, with the Harden Cemetery one, the reason we've put the pressure in is it's not actually feasible. There is no commuted sum, within the capital programme for us to be able to build that in. So we do that generally. Same with any other any bids we put in for things like active travel as well, we always try and build in, certainly over a 5-year period, an element of maintenance costs that we're likely to have to fund through revenue. But we've explored all the options there, and it's just not feasible anymore. This is why we've included it. The school transport 10 additional routes. It's a combination where feasible. We every September we don't know each year how many applications we're going to receive for school transport. We do work very closely with education to try and forecast, based on the numbers of pupils coming up from primary school. But what we don't necessarily know is, where they live and how far they need to travel. We do try and accommodate them on existing routes. So if we've got existing routes where they have spare seats on taxis, minibuses or big buses, we will always try and accommodate those pupils on those existing routes. But what we are seeing is additional learning needs increase in terms of the complexity of those particular pupils. So we have, it's a combination of some additional taxi provision for primary and secondary mainstream pupils, but also additional special educational needs routes as well. So it's a combination really. But we do have thresholds in place to review and trigger reviews for school transport. So where we see costs increasing or the number of routes increasing, we do have those already built into our contracts to look at whether we optimize those routes. So we might take a geographical area and try and re-optimize them, put them out to tender again, re-procure them, and the officers do that quite regularly. So we do that. So hopefully I've explained that one in enough detail. The residual waste indexation and whether it should be built into the contract, it is built into the contract, but we don't get given additional budget each year, unfortunately. And we've been able, I think in the past we've been able to absorb the costs when it has increased, but that's no longer feasible. I don't know whether Dave Ledgeham or Ruth want to come in and add to what I've just said there.
Yeah, morning members, it's Ruth Tully. Yeah, very much like Katie says, this is an annual inflationary price that's added. There has been opportunity in the past to mitigate that, particularly when we've been getting enhanced rebate rates for recycling. So that meant that we didn't have to put that forward at a pressure at that time. We have received cost pressures for it in the past when interest rates were significantly high. We were awarded a pressure of 330,000 at that time to cover and get that additional budget. But where we can, we try and mitigate that with the income that we receive from recycling. But unfortunately, as we say, the rebate rates are not at those high points anymore. So we've not been able to do this. So this pressure has now been put forward for next year and subsequent years to ensure that that's captured accurately.
Okay. Thank you, Ruth. I think the next question is around storm events and applying to Welsh Government for any extreme weather funding, and we have done that. We did that 2 years ago for the Emergency Funding Assistance Scheme, where following Storm Babette. So I think we did that last year. Similarly, we are putting bids in, and we have done previously, to the Resilient Roads Fund scheme, which is a grant funding scheme that we can fund drainage schemes for. So we are proposing to put additional bids in this year for next year's funding, and we were awarded funding this year to deliver some schemes along the A548. We will continue to do that, and we always do that. We have seen the amount of grant funding available decrease, however, so that has decreased over the years. This year, the application process for those grants has actually changed this year, and we have to get the bids in by Christmas time. And they have actually limited the number of bids we're allowed to put in as well. Whereas previously we could submit however many bids we wanted to. That's changed, and we are now limited to 1 to 2 bids depending on which grant funding scheme it is. So we will continue to do those though, and try and maximise those opportunities where we can. The reduced income for Trunk Road and the capital programme, that doesn't affect the routine maintenance programme that we deliver, so we will continue to deliver that work. That hasn't changed. I think what we've benefited from as an authority in previous years is those capital schemes, where we've been able to deliver programmes of work that have been, rather than the reactive maintenance, we've been able to benefit by doing that work in-house instead of going out to contract, and we've got income targets within our budget for those. But that's reduced this year, so it is going to impact our achievement of that income target going forward. We'll keep a close eye on it, and hopefully we might be able to reduce that as the year progresses, and once we get certainty as well around budgets for next year. But we've included it as a risk going forward for now. Recycling, about the Welsh Government funding, we do speak to Welsh Government on a regular basis. We're meeting them every couple of weeks at the moment, and funding comes up very often, so we will continue to lobby for additional funding to support any service changes we make, but also infrastructure improvements, and we will always continue to do that. We are still under threat of the infraction fines, and that's still a red risk on our risk register, so that hasn't gone away, unfortunately, and we've got the report later on this morning, which we'll come on to. But yeah, we will continue to lobby as and when we can. Winter maintenance, in terms of increased contractor costs, that relates to we use additional resources during the season, so not just our own gritters, but we use agricultural ploughs and equipment, which we have to fund. So again, we've seen a lot of that equipment's coming to the end of its useful life, so we're having to replace some of those tow along things, those tow along gritters and ploughs that the agricultural contractors employ. So that's what that relates to. With highway maintenance, in terms of the 420k pressure, the letter that I was mentioned in the action plan for the forward work programme earlier on, I am including an ask of Welsh Government for additional funding for highways and highway maintenance, because we've been underfunded for a number of years, and that's not going to change, unfortunately. So I'm going to include it in the letter that goes forward to the Minister. Certainly your idea around, or suggestion around, contribution for town and community councils for public conveniences, that's something we can take away and look into. We haven't explored that previously, but we have looked at things like community asset transfer previously, and we're going to revisit all of those things. So yes, we will look at that. So thank you for the suggestion.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Councillor Pearce, happy with the responses you've received?
Just to come back briefly, if I may, Chair. Yeah, I think it's quite a shame, really, Katie, that the grant funding is decreasing as demand is increasing. I don't quite understand how we can get that across to Welsh Government. We had a presentation from the WLGA the other week. The chief executive said he talks to ministers, and I think he's a bit exasperated that the message isn't getting through. So we do need to try and look at what alternatives there are. It's good that you're looking for the additional funding for the highways maintenance cost. Is there an option, if you don't get the funding or we don't have sufficient, that parts of the maintenance would have to stop? Now that would probably put us in a dangerous position, particularly with potholes and that. And while I'm on that, does the new pothole machine that I've seen with Councillor Banks at the depot there, does that pothole machine, is that an invest to save? Is it something we've got on lease? Have we bought it? I had a pothole fixed recently, a couple of roads from here. It was causing a problem on the way to school, but I don't think it's been fixed by a machine. In fact, I don't know what it's been fixed by. I think it needs redoing, to be honest, but that's another story. So is this an invest to save? Is this what we need to look at? We did have quite a robust invest to save program a couple of years ago. And would the pothole machine sort of help in reducing these reduced costs? And finally, I've got to finish on the potential infraction charges that's still hanging over the council. It's about time that Welsh Government took that away, because I think when you look at the commentary on item 16, Katie, about the increased focus has resulted in an increased uptake in the food bags and other receptacles. So I think that demonstrates that Flintshire are responding positively, and that needs to go back to Welsh Government as well and get rid of this infraction charge hanging over the authority. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pearce. Katie?
Yeah, I'll just come back on a couple of those. The first one was around the option to stop highway maintenance. Unfortunately, we have a statutory duty to remove defects from the highway, so that's not going to go away. That said, we are changing our approach and looking at how we do that, and that's why we brought that HAMP review report to you last month. So, you know, that we can't stop doing it, but we can look at how we can be more efficient and productive in terms of the delivery of that service. So we are doing those things. The Pothole Pro, in terms of how this was funded, and some of it's tied into the income we get from Trunk Road. So where we've been able to rely on that income in the past, we've been able to reinvest that funding back into the service. It is an invest to save, and you know we're trying to do more of that. So it should help us in the long run. So it certainly is an invest to save initiative. You know, it is. You know, it's taken us some time to get the Pothole Pro up and running in terms of training of operatives, and we've now got a core group of operatives who are trained, because it's such a specialist and expensive piece of equipment. So you know, we need to rely on, you know, people are going to look after that equipment and make sure that it continues into the future. But it certainly is proving its worth now, as that programme has rolled out across the county. I will ask Chris to come in a minute if he wants to add anything to what I've just said, but just cover the infraction fines. And yeah, certainly, you know, I take on board those, you know, the positive comments that we are certainly, you know, the changes that we are making. You know, we certainly are starting to see some of those changes, and we feel that, you know, similarly to you, that we want to have a decision on the infraction fines as soon as possible. And a letter was actually sent to the Cabinet Secretary in the last couple of weeks asking for an update, because we haven't heard anything as yet. So I'm aware that the Leader of the Council has actually written and requested an update. So just to give that assurance. I don't know if Chris wants to come in.
Thanks, Katie. Good morning, everyone. Just with regards to the Pothole Pro, yes, it was purchased through income generated by the Trunk Road contract, and it was reinvested, and it was taken as an invest to save opportunity for us. The machine has the potential to replace 2 crews, and if we had the money for the tar, we could just let it run all day, every day. Sadly, we can't afford the tar that it could lay at this time, but it has several benefits. It's helped us to bring more work in-house, so it's reduced the amount of work that goes out the door into contractors' pockets, and means that we can deliver the annual patching programme in-house now. It also means that it's a reduced risk of exposure to hand-arm vibration for the crews as well, something that was becoming more and more of a problem. Using the old-fashioned jackhammers was limited to about 8 or 9 minutes per operative per day, which you can imagine doesn't allow you to do much work. So we do still have to carry out temporary repairs, or blobbing, as it's unfortunately named, where there is a safety defect, and we have to get out there as quick as we can. But the Pothole Pro is there to do a more permanent, long-lasting repair and save money over the long term. So that's the idea of the machine. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Banks?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just going to come in on the infraction charges myself, and Councillor Pears is quite right. You know, they've been hanging over the council for a number of years now. The letter's gone in from Dave, signed by myself as well, and you know, it's a hard-hitting letter saying basically that you know we're doing everything possible to show that we're doing on the right track towards what the Welsh Government have asked of us. And you know, we've got to the stage now where the infraction charges have been mentioned so much that they're like the monkey on our back that needs removing. And you know, we are moving totally in the right direction. And as in the next agenda item, or this item 7 will show. And we don't really know what more we can do. And we're hopeful very, very soon that we do get some positive feedback. I know Ruth's working on that, as is Chris and Katie has, Dave has, myself. So we're all working on that in the right direction, and everyone is moving forward with us. Just while I'm on, I would like to mention just 2 quickly of the items. Item 1, public health burials. It pretty much shows where we're at as a, not as a council, but as a country, as a UK wide. The fact that so many people are needing this service, it's just a shame that it's so much needed. It really is. And on 10, the drainage, the storm events. I mean, that to myself highlights the fact that our revenue budgets are not big enough. You know, the fact that we're forever having to put in for bids for this, that, and the other. I mean, we've along the Katie's mentioned the A548 and some schemes. Some have been done, some are being done, and some are planned to be done. And we've along the 548, the difference that we're already seeing on that road is unbelievable. And we've mentioned this before over the tie-in it has with tourism, business coming into the area, everything, it's all tied in together. And that A548 being clear, which it is now, we've had areas that used to flood regular that are no longer flooding, which is absolutely fantastic. And it does need highlighting. But like, as I say, the core funding needs increasing massively on a lot of areas. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Banks. Okay, I'll open it up to any other members. Anybody? Councillor Lloyd?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I'm right in saying that this is on 19, really, this additional infrastructure. I'm right in saying that there's funding from Welsh Government for panda crossings. And I noticed, does that include the pedestrian crossings? Obviously a safety thing, zebra crossings as well. I thought if they could, I'm aware, well, in my ward, there's one hopefully going to be put by a school there. So I'm just querying whether that's available for other areas and pedestrian crossings. Obviously on the recycling, again, there's a big push for recycling at the moment, isn't there? And I'm pretty pleased that the recycling team are going to come to our Christmas fair in Saltney in December 12th, I think it is, to push for encouraging people to do more recycling, mainly on the food bins, as we've seen as we've been walking around with the officers. Very difficult to estimate how many more recycling items, food bins especially, you're going to need, and so to estimate a cost for that. And I think it's real, and obviously you're doing that, pushing Welsh Government, and they set a target, and Flintshire are doing the best to meet that target. So I think they should, I agree with Councillor Pearce and Councillor Bank, they should be providing more funding for these recycling containers, in particular food containers. So, but I'm pleased that you know, we're doing a lot, in my opinion, on the recycling, and you know, more, you know, plenty to do in the future as well, and to push them to do it. So quite pleased with that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Crease.
Thank you, Chair. It's item 4, the Connors Quay Cemetery fence. Anthony and several of his colleagues were kind enough to meet up with ward councillors in Connors Quay to look at the state of the cemetery fence in Connors Quay, and I don't think there's any doubt that it's an embarrassment for me as a councillor in Connors Quay. But if the capital bid is not accepted, does this mean that the fence is just put back again year on year, or are there alternative plans to resolve the situation? Thank you.
Okay, Katie or Ruth, do you want to?
Yeah, I can come in if that's okay, Chair. Yeah, so if we don't get the capital funding, but I'm fairly hopeful we will, But if we don't, there are two options. We can either continue to repair and maintain it in its current state, which is the 40k pressure that we're going to continue to see, or the alternative is you remove it, which in itself creates other issues. So those are the options available to us, and that's why we've put the bid in, and I'm hopeful that we will get that bid to be able to replace it.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Was Councillor Lloyd?
Yeah, just on that, the question I asked about the Panda Crossing, does it include, is the grant funding coming from Welsh Common for all the
Sorry,
crossings?
The grant funding that we get for things like zebra crossings or pedestrian crossings tends to come through active travel funding or road safety capital grants. What we don't get is the additional revenue funding to maintain them on an ongoing basis. So, those new assets of infrastructure will certainly cost us in terms of maintaining them. Things like bulbs or the energy costs to continue to provide them. So we don't get any additional funding for those. So we end up having to try and absorb those costs. So unless we get given additional budget, we have no option, which is why we've put in a 10k pressure for some of those additional assets that we've seen being built in the last few years.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. This is just looking towards the recommendations more than anything else. The recommendations, they stand, say, review and comment on the planning, etc. portfolio, review and comment on street scene transportation's portfolio's costs. I certainly appreciate that they've been reviewed and they have been commented on quite thoroughly. One of the questions I would pose to the committee, certainly because this will be going to Cabinet and this will be informing decisions we're taking along the process. I'd be careful the words there. Not only happy with what's in there, but are the committee content with what's happened, with what is there? Are they accepting? Are they in agreement with what we've put forward? Or the portfolios have put forward. I think that in terms of giving a steer and a direction, probably certainly helpful to myself anyway. Looking at the perhaps rather than review and comment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Johnson. Any members wish to comment? Online? No? Katie?
Yeah, I was just going to come in on the ones obviously for my portfolio. We obviously, there are those ones that are indicated with an asterisk. We feel they can be removed as pressures going forward. So I was going to, ask whether members wanted to, note that in their recommendations that they're supportive of those pressures being removed going forward.
Okay, thank you for that, Katie. Okay, is anybody happy with the? Sorry, Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I thought I'd finish, but Councillor Johnson has specifically asked a question that he needs or wants to take back to Cabinet. When I spoke, I made various suggestions. So if those have been noted, that will sort of help. And I support what Katie said, that those with the asterisk have been taken out, and I think that will leave a balance of about 1.1 million. Katie, is that correct? If we take the 0981 out, that leaves 1.1. But I think there is still potential, having spoke on some of these, where we could squeeze a little bit more out, go back to Welsh Government, ask for the funding there, contributions from town and community, town councils. Yeah, basically to just follow up what we said during the meeting. We haven't sort of sat here and say, yeah, rubber stamp it. No, we've looked at it quite closely. And I think that to go back to the committee or the Cabinet, look at what's been said here and then apply it and support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pearce. I think also the ongoing risks is another £500,000 to be added onto that. So, okay, and nobody else has indicated to speak. So if we can look to the recommendations with comments there that the explanations given are noted and supported. If we're happy with that. Okay, can I have a mover? Councillor Lloyd, seconder. Councillor Crease, can I have a show of hands, all those in favour? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to agenda item 6, consultation for a proposed new national park for North East Wales. They're bringing the Chief Officer.
Thank you, Chair. Time for something completely different. This is a live consultation which is running. It's been coordinated by Natural Resources Wales for a proposal for a new national park for North East Wales. It was part of Labour's manifesto for change when they were elected in 2021, I think. So it formed part of that. You might ask, why are NRW involved in it? NRW are the Welsh Government statutory advisor on landscapes. They're independent on this and are coordinating this consultation. You'll see there's a link to the consultation within the documentation. I'd encourage you to respond individually, and also I'd flag it up with your constituents as well to respond to it as well. It's a relatively short consultation, and technically it is only on the proposed boundary for the national park. But if you look, and I've included a blank questionnaire as Appendix 1, there are some quite critical questions within there, like number 8, which is, do you support a national park or not? And then it goes on to ask what it should be called. So I had a brief discussion about this at Cabinet, and they posed 3 questions. One was, does the council want to respond? The second one was, how are we going to respond? What process? And then thirdly, what are we going to say? So in answer to the first question, Cabinet were clear that they wanted a response to go in. Secondly, the process was that we would bring it to this committee, and any comments that this committee has got on the proposals we can include within the response. And the third question is, well, yes, what do you want to say? And that's a question for you as committee. You'll see that the consultation is open till the 16th of December. We'll be taking this back to Cabinet on the 17th of December. NRW are quite relaxed about that time difference, and will accept any consultations once it's formally closed. I suspect we'll do the questionnaire, fill in the questionnaire, and we'll have a covering letter as well, which I'll agree with Councillor Dolphin as Cabinet member for this area. One final thing is that this won't be the last consultation on the North East Wales National Park. We'll get a formal consultation in 2025, and that'll just go to the local authorities rather than this one, which is thrown much wider. So just for the sake of simplicity, really, and to clarify things, the boundary has been through a number of iterations over the past couple of years, with suggestions coming in to extend the area of outstanding natural beauty boundary up into the northeast, across into Halkin, and also into the Hope Mountain Kaigurley area as well. And having had those proposals, the proposal which is now in front of you, it just reflects the area of outstanding natural beauty for Flintshire. It's different as you head south into Wrexham and into Northern Powys, but for us, it's replacing the AONB with a national park and everything that that brings. So I'll leave it at that, and I'd welcome any comments that we could include in the response.
Okay, any members wishing to speak? Councillor Dolphin, bring you in first.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The Chief Officer gave a very good overview of the report. The questionnaire is a very simple questionnaire. There's only about 24 questions, of which 10 are about gender and age, etc. But question 8 is probably the one that should be question 1
Do you think the area proposed should be a national park? And that's something this council needs to decide. Do we actually think we should have a national park instead of the AONB that we already have? So that's a main question. Then there's other questions about question 13, obviously a name, and there's 2 proposals given in the questionnaire. So it's a very simple questionnaire to complete, but that question 8 is certainly one that needs to be addressed by the council. The NRW, Natural Resource Wales, are leading on it, as the Chief Officer said, and they'll decide if the evidence demonstrates that we should have a national park in North East Wales after all the consultations. So I would ask members and this committee to determine or think about, certainly, do we need a national park in North East Wales instead of the AONB? Or should we perhaps broaden out the AONB instead? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Dolphin. Okay, open up to any members, which is Councillor Lloyd.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just looking at the map here. I find it difficult to work out the boundaries, really. I must admit, on the map, you can't really see it very well. Looks a very big area. I'm just curious what the difference is between the national park and the AONB. I'm a bit concerned about what costs there'll be to the council, really. Do we know? I mean, it says in the report we don't know what costs are going to be, so it'd be interesting if anybody could give us an idea of that, really. But I think, as Councillor Dolphin says, the first question should be, do we want a national park? My personal opinion is no. Snowdonia is not far away, is it? I'm just more concerned about the cost. We're not really flush for money at the moment, are we? So that's my concerns anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd. Andrew, can you help with that one?
It's lacking in any detail around costs, because, and they will say, well, it's because we're just we are consulting on the boundary. But you're quite right. If you look at any other national park which has been formed, there's a whole governance structure that needs to be put in place in terms of council representation, but also a staffing structure as well. So you'd need a new chief exec, you'd need directors, etc. And I think it's really interesting that question 8 is one of the few questions where there's no text box, so you couldn't expand on it. So if that's the sort of thing that the council is saying, that we've got concerns around costs about putting this in place, that's going to have to go in a covering letter, I think, which needs to be signed off by Cabinet.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think that the explanation by Mr. Farrow about a new chief executive and a board, I think it's just another level of bureaucracy. Just looking at the online map of the area and the proposed name for this Brynii Clwyd out of Berwyn, it says Brynii Clwyd is the mountain chain from Prestatyn. It's on the maps, it's the Clwydian Range, which includes Molfamau. So we know it as the Clwydian Range. And if you look at the map, you can access it online, the official map for the area. The area which is here or proposed for a national park is already identified as the Clwydian Range and the Dee Valley National Landscape. Now, I don't see what the difference is between what we have now and what is proposed, apart from the name and the bureaucracy that goes with it. Every part of the Clwydian Range and the Dee Valley National Landscape is accessible, and I'm sure the national park, but I don't see the benefit of a national park when the access to the Clwydian Range and the Dee Valley is already there. And I think that, there should be an option there for people to vote for the English name as well, if that's what they wish. Make it bilingual. We seem to be moving away from bilingualism towards solely Welsh, which, is not an issue, but please give people the choice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pearce. I'll bring in a couple of others. Councillor Hodge.
Yes, good morning, Chair. I actually sat in on a consultative meeting with regards to the national parks, and one of the issues that came up and was quite prominent was the fact that anybody who lives in a national park could be subject to a local national park tax on top of obviously county council tax and the town council tax and paying for the police. There could be an actual additional levy made on anyone living in the national park. And it was quite a concerning item of that discussion. So I would just ask members to be aware that is something that could be in the mix in making a decision on this. Personally, I don't think we need one. I think we're quite happy with the areas of national beauty. We went through all of those at that meeting, and that's my position, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hodge. Councillor Chris Bithell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm glad that the members have raised issues that have been concerning me regarding this. You know, the cost issue is important. How is this going to be funded? You know, we had a long conversation a week ago with the Chief Executive of the WLGA, you know, about the way that we are funded inadequately for the responsibilities that we have. Where's the money going to come to finance an additional national park? Will that come directly from funding from Welsh Government? And if so, you know, how are they going to support that, given that they can't actually support many of the things they're responsible for at the moment and are struggling? And again, the other issue, of course, is in terms of funding this for perpetuity. Very often they will fund things when they set up initially, but in the long term, you know, other people will find themselves having to foot the bill for this, really. And I think we need clarification on that. It might be a very attractive thing to have, a nice thing to have, but you know, we need to have further information really on the ramifications and the impact for the area and indeed the other agencies, including ourselves. We are a planning authority again. I think, as Andrew Farrow has said, you know, and again, this will have an impact on us as well. Our involvement in the developments taking place in the national park will, in fact, be nil. It'll be handed over to that particular body. And again, in terms of recruiting staff, you know, we have a difficulty in recruiting staff very often as planning authorities, and they're going to have their own. And again, that's a bit of a worry too in that connection. And again, I think, you know, they tend to look at planning applications in the national park purely through the prism of environmental issues. And while that is very important, it's not the only thing that we need to be looking at and examining. You know, obviously, with the rural economy, we've tried to diversify and so on and ensure that local businesses and local industries are developed and progressed in the interest of the local economies in those areas and in terms of jobs. You know, and again, one is worried to a certain extent as to how that will impact on those particular decisions. And again, the comment has been made. It's not just the area, which in Flintshire case, looking at the map here, is not going to include that large amount of territory, as it were, but nonetheless, we know for a fact that, you know, very often they look at not just the national park area, but the views around the national park and looking into the national park or looking from the national park. We've had a lot of experience of this really as a local authority, you know, with the AONB. And again, to be quite frank, you know, I've always been pleased with the way the AONB is operated because they've done a very good job, in my opinion. And I think, you know, we had the recent paper on light pollution and the AONB, which was excellently executed, again, in cooperation, you know, with the officers from our own authority in Denbighshire. And that just demonstrates what we can do and what we are doing currently. And I don't think that that particular kind of service can be surpassed really by a national park authority. And if all Wales becomes a national park, you know, what's left really for the rest of the country? And really speaking, do all areas of the country actually meet the targets that we should be seeking for a national park? I think it will sort of denigrate the existing national parks if every part of Wales becomes a national park. So I think there are a lot of issues really regarding this which needs to be looked at, not just sort of ticking boxes about the area with due respect of the name. And again, I don't think these particular matters have been fully explored or indeed detailed. And I would need to have those particular questions answered before I tick any boxes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bithell. Councillor Rose.
All right, thanks. I think for this, we really need an understanding of how the National Parks Act works. I think the National Park Act goes back to the 40s, I think it was, and that is quite a large act. And I think for me personally, the difference between the AONB and the national parks are the AONB focuses on aesthetic beauty, which hasn't changed since the AONB was created, whereas most of the next generation's views on aesthetic beauty differ from previous generations. And I think that's a critical change in terms of what will happen. However, most of the staff, I presume, from the AONB will become the new National Park staff, so very little will change in that side. In terms of the National Park Act, one of the things that does come up a lot more is how it was created as more of a nature reserve rather than the amenity side, which I think the AONB focuses on a little bit more. Although the Act still has those elements of it, that's my preference. I think I agree in terms of cost. I don't know what the cost is going to be. I don't know who's going to be payable to those costs or what the local authority's impact is going to be. So I think until those figures are suggested or clarified as to where the cost is coming from, I don't think we should be saying yes or no as a local authority. But the other side of this is obviously this was a Welsh Government programme, so they are forging ahead with this as part of their plan for this term. So I don't think there's a mechanism to stop this in any way, shape or form if it was viewed that it was going to be a cost. But obviously if they're pushing forward with it, then the cost should come to us and we shouldn't really have to pay any additional costs for the creation of it. So I think that's the way I'd be pushing with that, in terms of happy for it as long as the costs aren't there, and then looking at the negatives that may impact residents within that area as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in the Chief Officer?
Yes, thanks, Chair. So just pick up a couple of points. A couple of people have sort of said, well, what's the difference between the AONB and the National Park? And Councillor Bithell picked up on this. Most national parks pick up the planning authority function. So the AONB covers 12% of Flintshire's area. So if this were to go ahead and they took up that function, that's 12% of Flintshire that the county council will have no control over in terms of planning functions. The AONB are a consultee in terms of developments within their area. So it totally flips it around. They would be the decision makers. We would be the consultee. There's an issue there about fee income as well, because planning fee income would go to the new national park. But the other side of it is that national parks have one primary purpose, and that is to protect the landscape. Whereas us as a planning authority have to balance that against delivering jobs, delivering housing, delivering sustainable growth. So the flip side of it would be that if within the national park, they're just protecting the landscape, that demand for development has got to go somewhere, and it will flick into the remaining 88% of Flintshire. The national park would have to put together their own local development plan, and we'd probably have to be revised. Well, we would definitely have to revise ours as well. Councillor Hodds talked about a levy being placed on the people within the national park. Well, the way national parks work elsewhere is that all the constituent authorities have a levy to pay. So it's irrespective of whether you live in the national park or not, it's likely to have a levy applied to everybody on top of the council tax for Flintshire as well. I'm not saying that will definitely happen, but that's how it works at other national parks across the UK as well. So yeah, there's a few things. It's not straightforward, is it?
Okay, thank you very much. Any other members wishing to speak on this issue? No? Councillor Lloyd, you want
I'm just question 3. What is your postcode? We would like to capture how many respondents live within the candidate area. So that tells me that they want to know how much money they're going to extra tax they're going to get in, does it? To me.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move to the recommendation on page 31 to note the ongoing consultation exercise and provide comments, and those comments have been made. So can I have a mover and second for that, please?
Chair, I did have my hand up to just make a final comment,
Sorry, Councillor Pearce.
particularly on the recommendation. Recommendation 1 is to inform a future response. Now, there's some comments about whether we should not say yes or not say no, but I don't think we can actually sit on the fence. We've had a debate, and we need to give some guidance to the future response, the officers who's putting in the future response. So whether we make a determination now that we're either for it or against it, or whether the officers have picked up that through the comments we've made, or whether we need to make a formal declaration at this committee. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pearce. I think I'm happy to, if you want to make a recommendation on that for a decision, if you want to put that forward.
I'd make a proposal that the committee does not support the proposal for a North East Wales National Park.
Okay, that's been seconded. Any other amendments to that? Okay, we'll take a vote on that then. For those committee members, can we support or not support the recommendation put forward by Councillor Pearce? Councillor Lloyd, those in favour? Okay, those against?
Against.
Okay, that's carried. That's members do not support the creation of a new national park for North East Wales. Okay, any abstentions? Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 7, residual waste collection change, implementation and policy update. And if I can just start off this one by saying that we're not revisiting the decision that's been made. This is about the implementation and policy update for it. So if I can bring in Chief Officer.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, members, and thank you, Chair. There are possibly some officers within the room, which when I hand over to Ruth shortly to take you through the detail of the report, I'll ask Ruth to introduce those additional officers as well. So as the Chair just mentioned, this is an update report. So the purpose of this report is to give you a progress update on how we're implementing the change. There are some details within the report around the implementation date. So we are proposing that the change comes into effect from the 28th of April. We're seeking to avoid the Easter holidays, and so that's why we've gone for that date, and Ruth will come on to that in more detail shortly. So we've got in the appendices several documents that are included. One is the high-level implementation plan. Just one thing to mention, we've got project groups set up around the implementation plan. We're meeting on a weekly basis, and beneath that project group there are a number of subgroups as well, and there is very much a cross-portfolio response in terms of trying to implement the change. And we're working very closely together with the comms team, procurement, IT, who are all part of the implementation plan. So that work's ongoing. So that's detailed. So behind each one of those work streams, there are, another number of other sub-projects behind those and actions. We've also included a communications plan for the service change, and what we'd like from yourselves today is if you have any additional suggestions that could be included in the communications plan, or you think we've missed anything in particular, or want a particular focus on an area, then please let us know. That's what we want to be building into the plan. So this is very much about the implementation plan. and giving you an update on where we are with things. We're not seeking any decisions today. It's more your feedback into that plan and making sure that we've not missed anything, or you've got suggestions how we might improve it. The other aspect is some policy updates. Again, we're not seeking a decision on these. These are previously approved decisions to be included in our updates. The first one's around our household recycling and waste collections policy. That's a policy that's been in existence for a number of years and has been previously approved, so we're not proposing any changes. However, there have been some service changes, not least the fact that we're implementing this particular service change that needs to be included in the policy. But there are things like nappy and AHP collections that commenced in 2021, things like the booking system at our household recycling centres for mattresses and asbestos need to be included. And I think on reflection, we should have updated the policy at that time when those services were introduced, but we haven't done. So we're including in the appendices an updated policy to reflect those previously approved decisions. We've also got an updated household recycling centre vehicle permit policy included in the appendices, and that's in response to a number of issues that have come to light since implementing the policy around customers with disabilities who might need to access the sites using their vehicles, and what we're talking about is large vehicles that have been either adapted to accommodate their disability and they have no access to an alternative type of vehicle. So we've seen a few things like camper vans that have been brought into site that have been adapted to deal with a disability. So it's inclusion of that within the policy going forward. I'll hand over to Ruth at this point to take you through the detail of the report and that implementations and communications plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Just before I start with the body of the report, just introduce you to a number of officers that have joined us today who are going to be key members of the team that will be delivering this. I'm sure many of you are already aware of them and have worked with them yourself so far, but for the purpose of those online, just highlight, obviously, Chris Goddard's here, the Service Delivery Manager, who's the responsibility for all the operational delivery. We have Chantel Humphreys, who is the Waste Strategy Manager, and we have 3 data compliance recycling officers. We've got Chris Cunningham, Abby Taylor, and Debbie Taylor. So a couple of those are very new to the team, but have certainly made quite a significant impact since being appointed, and I know that a number of you have already worked with them. All right, we also have 2 of our waste operations managers online. That's Kevin Edwards and our newly appointed waste operations manager, Andy Rhodes. So all of these, hopefully, when you have any questions at the end of the session, between us all, we'll be able to answer those effectively. So if we just start taking you through the body of the report, I'll start off at section 1.02, and this is implementation date. So we wanted to be clear and transparent of when we believe that it's achievable to introduce this significant service change. So the date that we've proposed is the 28th of April 2025. We appreciate that the pressures we have with achieving the recycling targets are very key, and we've been through those in quite significant detail, but that implementation date needs to be set at a time when we know that it's achievable, to ensure that we've done all the preparatory work that we can possibly do to make that transition as smooth as possible. So when we look at the implementation plan, you'll see that there's a significant number of work streams that we have to do before that service change to ensure that we are prepared for the movement of that 2-weekly to 3-weekly residual waste change. There's a number of things that we've had to plan out. We have to do testing of routes. We have to do data cleansing. So that all takes a period of time, and we need to ensure that that is done with adequate time to make sure that it's effective. Also, what we've taken into consideration is the likes of the public holidays. So obviously in this planning and preparation time, we have Christmas and New Year, which is always a very difficult operational time. But also what we've identified is that going into the new financial year, we have Easter holidays, which we know a lot of A lot of our residents take that opportunity to go away on holidays, and we didn't feel that it was appropriate to bring in such a service change while people potentially were away from their properties. So we identified the date of the 28th of April as one that is achievable in order for us to do that planning, procure sufficient resources. As we'll come on to the implementation plan, we have to actually procure additional recycling vehicles to be able to deliver this service change, and all of that takes that time to introduce. So in section 1.03, we've just highlighted there within the context of the report that high-level overview of the pieces of work that we are currently undertaking with our project team in order to deliver the service change for that date of the 28th of April. So it takes in a number of different work streams, such as data cleansing of our existing residual waste rounds, recycling rounds, the AHP collections, our assisted collections, and our medical collections. We've got residual waste and recycling round reviews, because if you recall from the proposals we put forward, we had approval not only to go to a 3-weekly residual waste collection service, but also to reduce the operational week from 6 days to 5 days. So that needs every single property to go through the round review to ensure that we have sufficient capacity on each of those 5 working days. We're doing a full review of our container stock levels and ensuring we have sufficient to meet any additional demand. As we've said before, our weekly recycling service is not going to change. We will be providing that as is now, but we are aware that there are a small number of residents that are not completely engaged with certain aspects, such as food recycling. So we want to ensure that we are distributing those containers to all that are going to need it. And then also, if any resident needs additional recycling bags to cope with additional recycling that we'll be putting out on a weekly basis, we need to ensure we've got our stock levels sufficient enough to meet that demand. And also from November, we will be undertaking the recycling container trial. So we were awarded funding from Welsh Government to look at alternative recycling containers. This was a bit of feedback we had from the consultation we were doing this time last year. So that recycling container review will take a period of 3 months to complete, and we wanted to ensure that that was done and undertaken before we went to the service change. Also, we're looking at staff and resource reviews to ensure that we have sufficient staffing and resources to deliver the service. That also entails consultation with those staff, and as well as the likes of trade union representatives. We're also looking at procedural reviews with our current services and data cleansing to ensure that the services we deliver when we've reviewed those rounds are as efficient as possible. And for example, one that we're undertaking at the moment is a review of the AHP subscription service. So that is a subscription only service. After 2 years, we have placed within the service that we put forward that after 2 years we do a review, and anybody that is no longer requiring of that service is removed, so that we're not visiting properties that no longer require the collection. So we're doing these full data cleanses and service reviews prior to any change to ensure we have those as efficient as possible. We also have to include in that planning of our garden waste subscription service, which begins in March, but we actually start providing those subscription opportunities in January. So we're building that within the plan. Looking at excess waste enforcement. So we have a very robust procedure in place for that at the moment, but we identify that in the first few months that there may need to be some enhanced monitoring of that to support our residents who may be struggling with adapting to the service change at the start of the term. Also, we're doing time and motion studies of existing work practices to ensure we are delivering those as effective as possible. And then when we're looking at the round review, that we're actually capturing sufficient time to build in the additional recyclate that we'll be collecting, as well as being able to achieve those rounds within the allotted work day. And then lastly, the fleet vehicle review. So while we are anticipating we're going to require less residual waste collection vehicles, we will actually require more recycling vehicles because that volume of waste is going to increase. So we have to review that fleet vehicle. We have to place orders for additional fleet vehicles to be able to meet that demand. So all those individual points are set out in a kind of Gantt chart, which gives timelines of when we're actually going to address those. And that's detailed in Appendix 1 to provide you with some overview of when we're expecting to start those projects and complete those projects. As we've been building the implementation plan, we've also taken advice from our partners at RAP Cymru, who support all local authorities, particularly when they're going through significant service changes. And they've been able to provide us with detail, information, evidence, and particularly, which has been helpful, lessons learned for other authorities that have gone through this change, so that we can anticipate any difficulties that we may face, and we can actually build those into our implementation plan to ensure that we're covering all of the aspects that we need to. Also, as part of the North Wales Regional Waste Treatment Partnership, we have some local authorities, part of that partnership, that are currently on a 3-weekly residual waste collection. So our operational team are speaking to those authorities to talk through those operational challenges and how they've overcome them, so that we can anticipate those and build those into our implementation plan. So it's kind of that forewarned, forearmed approach that we're learning from those that have already been through this process to make our transition as smooth as possible. In section 1.05 is details of our communication plan, and I do appreciate been in many meetings about recycling and waste, and members' concerns have always been about that engagement and that information that we provide to our residents, so that they are aware of what changes are coming up and how they can adapt to them. So we've built in a 4-phase communication plan, which we see being able to deliver key messages at key times to be able to support our residents. So phase 1 is kind of the preparatory phase. It's promoting what we're already doing to ensure that our residents are fully engaged and fully informed about the current requirements. Then phase 2 is post really these committee meetings, where we're publishing the date that we're targeting for implementation, and we're launching our main campaign, which we're titling Let's Get It Sorted. So that's a theme that we'll run through all of our communications, but this is where we step up that kind of communication about informing our residents of what change they will see, how they can adapt, and what they can do to put in place to make that transition as smooth as possible. And this will take an effort from all of us to share that information. I know a lot of members already work very closely with the team on the ground to start improving and engaging with residents on a more local basis, but we want to be able to share as much of that communication, whether that's social media, emails, leaflets, any kind of communication that we've got. We're working on videos that we can distribute to help people understand what they can and can't recycle. So phase 2 is really that step up. Then we have stage 3 in January, which is January to April. So really that 3-month period before we make the change, where we'll be doing more localized engagement in the area. So this is improving on community engagement events. We've done a lot over the summer, but this will be more specific in local areas. We will be ensuring that we are going to every property, door knocking, sharing information, providing containers where necessary, and really being more visible within the community. So if any residents have any questions, we can be on hand to support with those. And this will also be done internally with other departments. We already work quite closely with housing. We've worked with social services to ensure that we're sharing our message and our information through our other portfolios as well. So they work a lot in the community and can help with sharing that information. And also there'll be members' workshops, briefings. So at every point along the journey, we will be keeping you as members informed, because we do appreciate that residents do come to you in the first instance. And if you haven't got that information, we appreciate that's where frustrations do rise. So it's keeping you informed along that journey and supported. And then phase 4, which is April, this is post-implementation. So we realise our communication must not stop at the point where we've made that transition, and we mustn't rest on the fact that we assume everybody knows what they're doing, what the impact is and how they need to respond. So we will continue that support within the community to help residents, and particularly in areas where we know we do have low participation, to ensure that most are as engaged as possible. So the communication plan, again, is detailed out in Appendix 2 in a little bit more detail with regards to those timelines for each of those individual aspects. And as Katie mentioned, which I won't go through in more detail, but both of the policies are appended to the report. We have updated the household recycling and waste collections and household recycling centre operations policy to reflect those changes that have been approved previously. So we have our full operational delivery policy and how we deliver that to our communities in one document. And then also the same with the vehicle permit policy, where we have included that section where we've made those necessary adjustments which are required for those people within our community that do live with disabilities and have vehicles that are outside the scope of our current policy. So that has been included. There are some other minor amendments within the vehicle permit policy that reflect the changes that we have implemented at the household recycling centres, such as introducing the trade waste disposal service, but those are very minimal and minor. Just for ease of for that policy, the changes are highlighted in blue. That hasn't been done for the operations policy because there are quite a significant number of inputs into that policy based on the changes that we have made over the last, I think it was about 6 years since we last published the updated policy. So that brings my section to an end. Happy to hand over, Chair.
Thank you, Ruth. Before I bring any members in, I just want to start with my own question. Obviously, speaking from not just my own area, but an area across a lot of the Deeside Strip, I suppose, communal collection areas. We know that they have problems. I would request, I mean, I can see that the door knocking campaigns start from January, but I'd like them to start now. Because I think if we've got a problem with any area, it's communal collection points, it's flats and apartments above high street shops, it's bedsits, HMOs, shared properties, areas that you will often go along and not see recycling bags, boxes outside of, but you will see lots of black bins. And obviously, if they're going to go to 3 weekly, that's where our education and communication needs to start for me. And I can see that across lots of areas of the county. And with that in mind, I just thought, when I have been out door knocking previously, you don't catch a lot of people in. So are we planning to do a lot of weekend and overtime work so that we are catching people in at the evenings and weekends with this? Because it's no good going down some of these streets and getting a quarter of the street in and just posting a letter through the letterboxes of every other one, because I don't think that is effective enough, really. So we do need more face-to-face. And whilst we can have sort of road shows and workshops, I think there's nothing better than face-to-face on the doorstep, even though, as some of the staff will probably say, this can be quite slow and time consuming going along and doing that, but it needs to be done. And my preference would be to start in those areas that I've said where we've got the problems, which are communal collection points, really. I think those in more semi-detached, detached properties along the way will adapt and change to it more quickly and easier. I think we need to target those problem areas. So that would be my first question to you. Okay, Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I take your advice from the start of the meeting that we're not going to discuss whether it's a good idea or not. The decision's been made, so we accept that. But I do have a number of questions. under the resource implications, we can see what the expected annual savings are, but I don't see the cost of implementation. Very vaguely, it says a project group's been set up for the implementation and varying resources will need to be allocated. Well, we are heading towards a budget period, Chair. We've spent some time on budget pressures, etc. And I think to have varying resources really is too vague. I'd like to know, please, the cost of implementation of moving to the 3 weekly bin collections. If you don't have it now, perhaps the committee members could be furnished with that as soon as you have that. If we look at the first paragraph in the executive summary, it tells us why we are moving to a 3 weekly collection. The purpose is to 1, improve recycling performance, 2, maximize resource efficiency, 3, minimize waste, 4, reduce emissions, and 5, minimize the risk of infraction fines. So that is the fundamental reason why we're implementing the 3 weekly collections. So can we now establish a baseline to show us what the current state is of each of those categories? And the purpose of that is by establishing this baseline, we'll be able to we'll be able to monitor the any improvements that's proposed, and we've been given that assurances performance will improve. So if we establish a baseline now, and we can do it from December, we can then review the performance in perhaps 6 months' time. So if we're starting on the 28th of April, May, June, July, August, September, October, that first 6-month period can be assessed against the baseline that's been established in December 2024. And then we should be able to see whether the improvements stay the same, it's improved, or it's got worse. And I think then that a good time to review it would be January 2026, if we can schedule in an agenda item to this committee so that we can scrutinise this. So it's not just a case of introducing it and let it run and let's see what happens. We do need to monitor and see that the reason for this has been achieved. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pearce. Katie or Ruth?
Yeah, if I could come in on a few of those, and I will hand over to Ruth in a second as well. I agree. I think first of all, to your own points, Chair, around the communal collection points, we've also identified those as a particular work stream that we need to focus on. And I take on board that you've suggested the door knocking campaign needs to start now. We have got a programme of work through the recycling and compliance data officers to deal with flats. HMOs is more difficult because we don't have a full register of where they all are. So that said, though, we are looking at communal collection points and how we improve those, and we've got some really positive examples where I think we actually brought those to a previous committee with some photographic evidence of where, before and after we've implemented changes, and we've now got individual bin stores and where they can keep all their containers separately, and we've seen a marked improvement in terms of the take-up of recycling services in those particular areas. So we have got a programme to deliver ahead of the change, and we're slowly working through that. Then in terms of the door knocking campaign out of hours, yes, we are going to have to do that. So we've already identified that people will be at work during the daytime, so we are going to have to program that in. We're not intending to incur additional costs through doing that, so it may be we need to adjust working times for a temporary period. It may be they don't come in at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning on certain days. They come in later to be able to work later into the evening. So we are going to do that, obviously, in consultation with staff and the trade unions. In terms of the cost of implementation that Councillor Mike Pearce raised, we actually included that as part of the scrutiny call-in. We gave quite a lot of detail, and we actually presented those costs within the within that report. Happy to circulate that again to members, but we did actually bring that to the July and August committee cycle. In terms of varying resources being needed to be allocated, that's from our own existing pool. We're not recruiting additional staff or anything like that. This is our own implementation. So when we talk about the project group, that's myself, Ruth, Chris, Chantal, the recycling and data compliance officers. We've already highlighted some of the lessons learned that RAP Cymru have pointed out about, we're trying to deliver this change on top of business as usual as well. So this is, we are delivering this change while we're also still delivering services at the moment. So we're not proposing additional resource at this stage, but we are looking at some programme management support to be able to coordinate that. So I'm doing that obviously through HR and the chief exec at the moment. So we are seeking some support in respect to that, and we obviously need to identify how that would be funded as well going forward. So as soon as I've got more information on that, we can include it. We are reliant obviously on additional resources from IT, procurement, and they are very much business support functions anyway to deliver service changes. So again, we'll be relying heavily on those support functions to deliver the change at various points in the implementation plan. The other one, I think you raised the point about establishing a baseline, and when we presented the options for service change, we did that. So the baseline's already established. So it's the figures that we took to the July cabinet and part of the call-in for scrutiny. Those are the figures are our baseline. So that's what we will be using in terms of monitoring our performance going forward. And that's very much, all of that came from the modelling work that was undertaken in partnership with local partnerships and RAP Cymru. And we've gone away, we've reviewed that in quite a lot of detail. We're using that as our baseline because they are based on our existing performance. So yes, we will be bringing further reports in the future. We have to report to NRW on our recycling performance on a quarterly basis. So we do that in retrospect following that quarter. So we have to submit figures through waste data flow to NRW on the tonnages that we collect. So we do that on a quarterly basis, but we're happy to agree that frequency that you want to see progress reports going forward, that's not a problem for us. But just to be clear, we've already established the baseline. We've already presented on the costs for implementation previously, so those have been presented to members in previous reports.
Okay, thank you, Katie.
Can I just come back on that, please, Chair?
I'll carry on, Carol, please.
Yeah, except we had figures previously at the call-in, but as you'll see in today's report, there is additional information. So under section 103, we have an implementation plan, and also we have a communication plan which looks quite comprehensive. So this, I suspect, is in addition to what we had previously, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Lloyd.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, collection points, as you all know, is one of my bugbears really, and I'll just give a shout out to Chris there in the corner, and Adriana and Michelle have been round there, certain areas in Saltney with me and Councillor Shawcross. And that will be a problem. I don't know what the answer is really. It's terraced houses, not only HMOs, not flats, it's terraced houses as well with a long street, and when the vehicles can't get round the back. And we didn't really see any recycling, especially food again in them areas. So I'm pleased to walk around with Chris and Adriana and Michelle. And I'm pleased again, as I mentioned earlier, that they'll be coming to the Christmas parade in Saltney to persuade people to do more recycling. And we've had recycling containers dropped off at me in Council Shawcrosses. And in fact, only yesterday I supplied a bag, a recycling bag to a resident. I'm sure other councils do the same. Also pleased to turn about the vehicle permit to see that disabled vehicles now will be allowed to apply for a permit, obviously to meeting the necessary qualifications, i.e. blue badges, etc. And you know, this agenda item is to implement the date and other things. We've been there before, haven't we? The decision's been made by Cabinet. It's been made confirmed at the call in, and we've even had a special meeting about it. So I don't think we should go back. I think this committee now should just make a decision on the implementation date. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, nobody else is indicating to speak. Councillor Banks.
Can I just make a point? Sorry, it was just going back to one of Councillor Pearce's points about the update. Completely support that we will be providing updates on the implementation and the outcomes against our objectives. But it's also updated quarterly within council plan. It's one of the sub priorities under the circular economy section. So we do provide quarterly updates in there anyway, just so that members are aware that that is where that's published, and also within the risk register specifically around achieving recycling targets and the mitigation of the infraction fine, and we report on the risk register on a monthly basis as kind of business as usual at the moment, but that will continue to be published as part of when we implement the change, and that will show and give assurance to members of any improvements that are made.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got Councillor Rose.
Thanks. Yeah, it's good to see, you know, a full list like this, but you know, I do personally love a Gantt chart. But in terms of the communications plan, having dealt with comms for quite some time, it's quite empty in terms of the specifics that go with it. Obviously, this is a strategic document, but that strategy should include the measurables within each of those communication plans, you know, so each of those lines should have a measurable outcome and expectation from that line. There's also questions in terms of, you know, just looking at the top, did you know campaign, social media engagement, social media. So the social media, I presume, is a paid campaign, not just updating on your current social media, because the engagement isn't going to change there. It's what, nearly 67,000 houses or so in Flintshire at the moment. Only a certain percentage of those will like the page to ever see any engagement in them. So it's got to be a paid campaign to outreach to new people. And that number of how much you're spending and the number of outcomes and people that see it and how many new people see it is the measurable outcomes that we'd expect. Obviously, these engagement sessions, how, when, you know, you're saying the big concern there is you're saying that you're not expecting any additional staff or hours to, you know, you're doing it in the current workload. When we know the stress is under the current workload, I don't know how those staff are going to achieve quite a big list of things, you know, similar to what the chair mentioned in terms of the door knocking side of it. You know, to knock 67,000 houses is a big thing. I presume that these are targeted in terms of areas or routes. And again, similar to what the chair said, my concern was the you know, people being at home with, you know, some of the poorer wards requiring everyone working longer hours or shift work patterns. So I don't know how that's going to be measurable and achievable in those areas. And then when you look further down, you know, the next one on the list is recycling education, increase promotion of services and equipment. But it doesn't say how, when a communication plan is how. So the top one says social media. Presumably the second one is also social media and engagement sessions. And that's actually the same thing, just moved to a different campaign strategy in terms of recycling education, not did you know. And then as we go further down, it's a similar thing in terms of, I don't know whether these are just the campaign is continuing in the same function in terms of the social media and the campaign lines are changing as you go along those bits in the phase one. Similar with the next one, promotion of clear bag policy. Again, a communication strategy says how and why. This doesn't say that. And so for me, as a communication plan, this isn't a plan, this is an outline. This hasn't got any detail to scrutinize in terms of a communication plan. And that would concern me, because each of those will have costs, never mind man hours in some of these things. I agree a door knocking campaign is great, but the man hours expected to measure in terms of how many doors we've knocked, how many we're expecting, and how many hours we're expecting to do it, and how many staff are expecting to do it, and when they're doing it, whether it's overtime hours or whether they're not available during the weekday to cover up weekends, is also going to have a relative cost impact to other areas of day-to-day activities, which I didn't see mentioned in the cost side when it come up, sort of thing, because we hadn't seen this plan. So that, to me, there's too many areas there that don't actually have the needed necessary information to say yes or no. Although, yeah, I like the idea of where it's going and you're on the right track. For me to say yes to this, it's just too empty, and it's not detailed enough for me to have the right things to be able to say I agree with the actual plan, because this isn't an actual full plan. This is just a list of possibilities, sort of thing, rather than an actual whether there's another document behind this that has more of that detailing. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that, Katie.
Yeah, so just to come back on some of those points, and yeah, absolutely, this is a very high level document, Councillor Rose, and you're quite right. There's a massive spreadsheet behind this with lots of different tabs on it. So each one of these work streams has got a significant amount of information behind it. We couldn't present that to you in a report. It would have been, quite a lengthy report at that stage, but we're quite happy to, give oversight to members if they want to come in. We are planning some briefing sessions with members, so that hopefully will, I think we did propose one. I think that was one of my questions to yourselves. We were going to propose a briefing session in the new year, but we might have to bring that this side of Christmas, so that you've got more information to help you, look at those plans in more detail. There is a lot of information behind those, and as I mentioned, this is a very strategic plan, what we've presented in the appendices, because there is a huge project plan behind this already. We have taken support from local partnerships and RAP Cymru to build that project plan because of their experience in supporting other local authorities to deliver the changes elsewhere. So they have templates that we've been able to adapt for mobilisation plans and comms plans as well. So we're very much leaning on them as well to get that resource in terms of communications. You asked about paid social media campaigns, and we'll be led by the corporate communications team in terms of those particular campaigns and whether they're paid or non-paid. We are seeking to hold face-to-face sessions. We've recognised that not all residents have access to the internet and social media. Some may choose not to. So we will be holding drop-in events as well at things like the Connect centres, so that people can come in and speak to us about the changes. I'm actually a resident in another local authority area where the change has been implemented already, and they brought it in 2018. It's been in for quite a long time now, but I remember when they implemented the change, they had officers. I mean, I think I must have had 3 or 4 different officers knock on my door at the time ahead of in the run up to the change, coming in to inform you about the change, checking that you had all the necessary equipment and containers and bags and so on before it was implemented. And that did happen at weekends and in the evenings as well. As I mentioned earlier on, again, we're not proposing to pay overtime. It may be that we need to adjust working patterns to accommodate that. And people, as I mentioned, they might be a change of days in a particular week, or it might be a shift in the working pattern where people come in slightly later and finish later. Again, we need to do that obviously in consultation with the trade unions and staff who would be delivering that change as well. So I think there is a lot of detail behind that particular Appendix 2. So just to assure members that that isn't the level of plan that you see, but we have, trying to present it in a Gantt chart is very difficult because there are, those work streams are projects in themselves, and there are a number of steps behind those.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Ruth wants to come in.
Yeah, just to add a little bit further to Katie's explanation, particularly around, I suppose, the resource element, that yes, there is a lot of work for the team to do, but members of the committee will remember we actually increased the waste strategy team by 3 additional officers. Just a year and a half ago, we had additional funding to introduce those 3 officers, and at Scrutiny it was questioned what those officers would be doing and what they would be delivering and what benefit they would bring. And I think this communication plan is quite evident to that additional work that is going to be required to implement and sustain that service change. And also, we don't see this just as a waste strategy or a waste operations kind of role. We'll get the environmental enforcement team involved. We're already working cross portfolio with housing officers, so we have additional resource there that we can work jointly and collaboratively. And as some of the members have already mentioned today, they've been out with the team and provided that kind of door knocking piece of work. So to have sufficient resource to deliver this, we believe we have what we need to be able to get out on the ground without any additional cost to be able to engage with our residents. Also, with the work we've been doing with RAP Cymru and local partnerships, we've actually been able to secure funding to support with our communications plan. So where we need development of assets, printing of leaflets, for example, and support with developing that communications package. We actually have teams within RAP Cymru that are supporting the team at the moment, which is, again, additional resource, but also taking away the cost from the authority about producing those leaflets, getting translations, for example. So they have sufficient support there to help us with that, to reduce our own internal costs.
Okay, thank you for that, Ruth. Councillor Wakeham.
Thank you. Just looking at the Appendix 2, in Phase 3, the second one down, the delivery of the new collection schedules. As you know, the current collection schedule has ended, or the calendar has. And in my ward, there are, like Katie said, there are some people that don't do the internet, don't want to do the internet, or can't. So I used to print them out and deliver them to people. Unfortunately, it's now gone from A5. So if I want to do it, it's monthly on the system now. So it's 7 pages to print out, which you've got to do it in colour, obviously, because it's colour. Are we able to fill that gap in between now and April? Because I'm gonna struggle to cut enough trees down, possibly. Thank you.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. There is some questions we've already been asked with relation to that. We are currently producing the older format that you're typically used to and our residents are used to, so that it is a little bit simpler to print off or just have a stock for your local community to distribute. So we're just waiting for completion on that from our graphic design team, and then they will be uploaded onto the website for people to either download, or the likes of Connect Centres or yourself can print those off, as we have done in previous years when people have either lost or misplaced their calendar. So we'll still be continuing with that. The only change is up until the point where we introduce the service change, we're not going to be delivering a calendar to every property, but we will do in advance of the service change. So every resident will have that calendar.
Can you send that to all members when it's released in a PDF? So we have okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Glenbanks.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate Katie, Ruth and Chris on what I personally feel is a rather comprehensive report, and it was presented very well as well. I've got to say, I'll give a couple of examples here of where you don't go into the nitty-gritty of giving every detail on what's in a report. I mean, we get reports coming before us about grass cutting and recycling rounds, but they don't go into the detail of where they're going to be cutting the grass at a specific time or the recycling. We just assume and trust that it's going to take place. And similar to this, it's we know it's going to be put in place. So that leads on to the fact that part of the delivery belongs to all of us, as in everybody. Our bit is briefings, workshops, going out, as some members have already done. Councillor Lloyd has already been out, as have many others, and I'll be going out and about myself and welcome invites to come to other areas. Not everyone's like, but some of them, you know, I'll be able to come along with some of them. But yeah, very comprehensive, like I say. It's open to all of us to sort of chip in, doing our bits. Just want to mention on the communal areas, obviously every area seems to have one or two of these, and it's all about creating ownership. And Katie hinted, came up on with pretty much the answer, which is making getting it more individualising it where possible. Now, difficult on roads and streets, but that's where we've got to be knocking and asking a minute what they feel they could be doing, but we could do better for them to help with that. And lastly, I'll just mention for Councillor Lloyd, are we all getting an invite to this Christmas party? Yeah. So, you plugged it enough. Okay, mate, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, members. There's no indication of any further speakers, so I'll move to the recommendation on page 43 and page 44. There's 5 recommendations there. Generally, Scrutiny support the proposed implementation date, supports the implementation plan presented, supports the communication plan presented, and notes the updated recycling and collection policy, and notes the updated vehicle permit policy. Can I have a mover? Councillor Lloyd. Seconder? Councillor Wakeland. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour? That's carried. And that... Sorry? It's clearly carried from those that have voted. So thank you all for your attendance today, and that concludes the meeting. Thank you very much.